Hi, I'm Miranda and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm getting cozy with you and sharing some of my favourite reads for winter. So these are all books that I think would make the perfect companions to cold, long winter evenings. First up is a fabulously gothic read. This is Bone China by Laura Purcell. Laura Purcell's writing has been compared to Daphne du Maurier, and there definitely is a bit of a du Maurier flavour to her writing. She always writes quite gothic books with strong, if complicated, female characters at the heart of them. This is her latest book, and it is a really great read. I'm going to link to an interview I did with Laura in the description box down below, where we talk about this book and also some of her other books if you're interested in hearing a little bit more. But this is set in Georgian Britain. It follows the story of a woman who's travelling across Cornwall, so there's another du Maurier link. A lot of this is set in Cornwall, and she's going to be a companion to an old woman who's living in a very remote house set up on the cliffs of Cornwall. When she arrives at the house, Esther, or Hester as she also goes by, an assumed name in the book, you find out why when you read it. When she arrives, she is instantly struck by the very curious setup in this house. The old woman that she is a companion to will only sit in one freezing cold room, where she refuses to allow a fire to be lit, and she just stares at this wall of blue and white china. So this is a very riveting read. You definitely want to keep turning the pages. It's a great wintry read as well. There's a lot of cold in the book. And yes, one that I definitely recommend for the winter months. So next up, another sort of gothic-y tale that I think this actually starts in November. And this is the 13th tale by Diane Setterfield. And a young woman is surprised when she receives a mysterious letter from a famous writer called Vida Winter, to go to her rather creepy old house in the countryside and to hear the tale of Vida Winter's life, which turns out to be a truly extraordinary story about strange siblings, strange twins, and just it was such a gripping, if really extraordinary read. And again, this is very much in the sort of gothic vein of writing. There's a twist at the end that I didn't see coming, that I thought was almost cheating the reader a bit, but there are enough clues. You definitely know something very strange is going on, but I anyway didn't guess quite what it was, and I thought that that was really well done. So yes, you have read this book for the ending too, but this is going to keep you gripped as well. Another good one for the long winter evenings. Then my next recommendation is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Mary Shelley wrote this when she was only 19 years old, which is truly extraordinary. And I love the story behind how she wrote Frankenstein almost as much as the book. The idea for Frankenstein came to Mary Shelley when she was on holiday in Geneva with Byron and with her husband Percy Shelley. And although it was in the summer, it was actually a very cold summer. There was terrible weather, so they were all collected indoors, and they had set themselves a challenge to write and tell each other ghost stories. And Frankenstein is what came out of Mary Shelley's initial idea for a ghost story. It's an incredible book. I'm sure all of you sort of know the story of Frankenstein already, about this scientist who creates a man, or he intends to create a man, but in fact he creates this freak who's really a monster, or who looks like a monster. It's a tale of scientific hubris, and it's such a classic read. But even if you know the story, it's so well worth actually reading the original text. It's a great winter read because a lot of the memorable action takes place against the sort of snowy alpine landscape. So definitely add this one to your winter reading list. It gives you real chills, shall we say, when you read it. This is another classic and a favourite of mine, always for winter, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I think in the winter, with those long evenings, you have more of a tendency to want to read a really big book that you can just enjoy. By the way, I know when I'm talking about the winter months, I'm really talking to my Northern Hemisphere viewers and listeners, but I do live in the Northern Hemisphere, so bear with me on that. And winter here is cold right now. So Jane Eyre starts with a famous line, there was no possibility of a walk that day, the weather was too terrible. And to me this is just such a great wintry sort of read. It's also a great romantic read, so it's a good choice for February. But yes, I think Jane Eyre is a wonderful book to curl up with at this time of year. Then this is a memoir, Bookworm by Lucy Mangan. And it's a memoir of childhood reading. And I think this is just the perfect sort of comfort read for the winter. Lucy Mangan writes about all of the children's books that she grew up with and loved, and that she still reads and very much enjoys. And there are so many wonderful classics in here that this is just a quintessential cozy read for me now. It makes me feel nostalgic, but it also reminds me of books from my childhood that I would like to actually reread. So I highly recommend this one if you're in need of a little bit of comfort. Then one of my favourite children's books that I like to read in the winter is White Boots by Noel Streatfeild. This was also called Skating Shoes. I think in America it was published as Skating Shoes, but the original British title is White Boots. And it's about a young girl who wants to become a professional ice skater. It's about competition and jealousy that she has to handle from her good friend who also wants to be an ice skater. And I loved this book when I was little, and it still is just a really wonderful read now. So if you're in the mood for just a cozy read, then I really would recommend White Boots. Moving on to some more non-fiction, I love this winter anthology by Melissa Harrison. This is part of a set of 4 of these seasonal anthologies that Melissa Harrison edited, and it's a lovely collection of poetry and short stories, both from modern day writers as well as classic authors. And I think it's very well edited and put together and makes a lovely read for winter. So I always enjoy pulling this one out at this time of year. The Nature of Winter by Jim Crumley is another excellent wintry read. Jim Crumley is such a good nature writer, and this book does show him at his best. I found this such an interesting read. I especially enjoyed the chapter about wolves, and he makes an argument for wanting to bring wolves back to Scotland, to reintroduce them to the Scottish landscape. I just found that really interesting, and this was an excellent read. Talking about Scotland still, The Art of Coorie by Gabriella Bennett is a really fun read. I interviewed Gabriella last year on Tea and Tattle podcast. I'll put the link in the description box if you'd like to listen to that interview. Coorie is a Scottish word. Essentially it means almost the same as hygge does to Scandinavians. So it's this idea of coziness, of sort of warmth and comfort that you get from a certain way of life, or from doing certain activities, like sharing a convivial meal with friends, or settling down yourself with a cozy book and a glass of wine with the fire going, for instance. But I really loved talking to Gabriella on the podcast about what Curry means to her, about how Curry is inspiring a lot of Scottish artists and designers, and why this word is coming back into use and why it's important to Scotland at the moment. So yeah, this was a really interesting read, and also has some beautiful photographs of the Scottish countryside, of Scottish cities, and interviews with local sort of artisan makers and so on. So yes, really, really lovely read. Then The Light in the Dark by Horatio Clare is a really excellent memoir to read in the winter. This one is really interesting to me because it's written from the perspective of someone who actually really struggles with winter, who hates the lack of light and actually becomes quite depressed during the winter. And I know a lot of people suffer from seasonal sadness, and a lot of people really struggle with the dark days of winter. And I've actually always enjoyed winter, so I'm lucky I've never become depressed at this time of year. But it was so interesting to me to read this book by Horatio Clare. He talks really openly about struggles with his mental health that he faces every winter. But in this book, he actually tries to look for the positives during this season. And he really writes about his struggle, but he also writes about the glimmers of hope that he gets, that he writes about the beauty he can see in the landscape around him. He lives in the English countryside. And I really enjoyed this. I thought it was a really brave book, because he does share a lot of his personal thoughts and reflections and his personal depression as well. But it's so important to talk more and to read more about mental health. So if you're someone who struggles in the winter, then I really recommend reading this one. But even if you're like me and you enjoy winter, this is just lovely to read for the poetic prose. I think Horatio Clare, again, he's such a great nature writer, and this is a really strong work of his. Then this is quite a charming book, Making Winter, a creative guide for surviving the winter months, Emma Mitchell. And this is just full of creative ideas for ways to pass your time in the winter. There are lots of activity suggestions for things that you can try. There are sort of patterns with knitting and crochet patterns. There are craft things that you can do. I'll try and show you. So here's a paper leaf and a berry bough that you could make, or you could make with children. There are just lots of really lovely ideas of how to enjoy winter. And I think that this, again, if you find winter a little bit of a struggle, then a book like this may give you some great ideas as to how to enjoy it more. I do think winter's so much nicer, obviously, when you've got Christmas to look forward to and things like that. But months of January and February, I think, are notoriously hard months. So these books hopefully will really cheer you up if you need some cheering up. Going back to Scotland, this is The Secret Life of Tartan, How a Cloth Shaped a Nation by Vixie Ray. I found this really fascinating. It's a history of tartan, and Vixie Ray, I think she was involved in designing a lot of the costumes for the film about Mary Queen of Scots that was out last year with Saoirse Ronan and Margot Robbie, which I really enjoyed seeing in the cinema, and the costumes were amazing. So Vixie Ray was involved in that, and this is just a fascinating history of tartan. It is, of course, famous in Scotland in particular. So if you're interested in Scotland, then this is a great book to read as well. But also how nice to snuggle up in tartan at this time of year, and also to find out a little bit more about that fabric. And then my final choice is another non-fiction, gorgeous coffee table style book. It's called Bibliostyle, How We Live at Home with Books by Nina Freudenberger. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. This is a collection of private libraries in the homes of creative people who live all around the world. One of my favourite libraries, I've just marked it for you, is the library of Pierre Letin, who is an illustrator. He did a lot of the New Yorker covers, and this is his private library in his home in Paris. And oh, it's just stunning. I mean, look at that. So this book is definitely #book porn. There are so many gorgeous libraries in here, and if you love books, if you love just drooling over pictures of stunning libraries, then this is definitely a book for you. And yes, again, it just makes, to me, lovely winter reading when you do tend to be in libraries a lot more. And yeah, I highly recommend this one. It would also be a lovely gift for anyone who you know to be a book lover. But anyway, those are all of my suggestions for reading this winter. I'd love to know if you enjoy seasonal reading at all, if that's something that you tend to do, if the seasons ever dictate what you read. Let me know if you've read any of these books, what you thought of them, or any books that you think I might enjoy during the rest of the winter. Do give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel, which you can do by just clicking on my face that pops up here. But thanks so much for watching. I'll be back again very soon with another video. So until then, bye!